Labdien, Eiropas mājā! Šodien mums ir kārtējā politikas diskusijā apaļais galds ar sociālajiem partneriem, ar ieinteresētajām pusēm, un šoreiz tēma ir digitālā programma Eiropai. 17. jūnijā dalībvalstis Eiropa padomē tikko pieņēma stratēģiju Eiropa 2020. Skaidrs, ka digitālā dienas kārtība, digitālā programma ir viena no 7 galvenajām iniciatīvām. Skaidrs, ka dalībvalstis pat labam tikai sāk darbu pie Eiropa 2020 stratēģijas, respektīvi nacionālās programmas tiek izstrādātas. Un man jāsaka, ka komisija iet soli priekšā dalībvalstīm, piedāvājot jau šajos 7 virzienos savu redzējumu, savu programmu Eiropa 2020 ietvaros. Man ir prieks, ka šodien šeit ir 2 kolēģi no ģenerāla direktorāta informācijas sabiedrības un plašsaziņas līdzekļu ģenerāla direktorāts. Man ir prieks, ka šeit ir vēstnieks. Es tiešām teiktu, ka tas ir DigiInfo vēstnieks direktors Bērns Langehaine. Paldies, ka jūs esat šeit, un te ir arī viens latvietis kolēģis Mātiņš Priedīts, kurš ģenerāla direktorātā Info ir referents un strādā ar šiem jautājumiem.
Well, thank you very much for this kind introduction, and I must say it's a real pleasure to be here in Riga, not only because it's a beautiful city, but because you have beautiful weather here. And I must say, from what I have seen so far, I'm very much impressed, and I hope that we have an interesting morning together. We would like to talk to you about the digital agenda for Europe, and then if we have some time at the end, I would also be glad to discuss the body of European regulators for electronic communications, and in particular the office of this body, which will be located in Riga. And seeing all this around me here, I can only congratulate the Council of Ministers to their choice. Let me just remind you that the Digital Agenda for Europe is the first one of the so-called flagship initiatives of the EU 2020 document. EU 2020 is a kind of blueprint for action for the new Barroso Commission for the years 2010 to 2015. And I think it's absolutely justified that we start with the ICT issues, because information and communications technologies are a central driver for growth and productivity, and that is extremely important, I think, in today's economic environment. According to our figures, 50% of productivity growth comes from an efficient and innovative use of ICT, so it is certainly worthwhile to look at this issue. The most interesting new element is that the digital agenda is an integrated and comprehensive approach that involves all stakeholders. And I think in particular this last element is crucial, and our visit here today is part of this approach. We want to explore and discuss some of the issues that we have put up on the screen here. And you will see that the digital agenda for Europe is structured in particular around 7 problem areas. We have fragmented digital markets. Normally the internet knows no boundaries, radio spectrum knows no boundaries, but nevertheless we are faced with 27 different markets, and that does not allow us to benefit as much as possible from efficiencies, from cross-border trade opportunities, etc. There's a lack of interoperability that we experience, interoperability between applications and services. We have problems of low trust in networks. We have rising cybercrime. We have spam. Then there is the large task of building new networks. We need to make sure that we have modern networks that are capable of carrying large capacities of traffic, fixed but also mobile, with mobile data transmission on the rise. Mobile capacity becomes one of the new important bottlenecks. When you look at the next slide, you will see that as far as legal music downloads are concerned, and I should emphasize legal, we're only at 25% of the figures that we see in the US. We're ahead of Asia, but in general, I think the possibilities of buying music legally, also cross-border, is not as well developed as it could be. When you look at the next slide, you will see some more research into the reasons for digital markets being fragmented, and in particular the ones where we can do some more work we have circled. It's the question of payment security, it's concerns about privacy, it's trust concerns, data protection is very important. People are sometimes hesitant to give their credit card number. There is no clear identification and signature system yet. At least e-signatures, which we'll come back to later on, is not working as well as it could. And all this then continues to leave the digital markets fragmented. When we come to the next slide, you will see the reference to lack of interoperability. Standard setting is becoming more and more complex. The procedures we have at the European level are quite lengthy and are not as efficient as they could be. And I think interoperability is a key issue in today's world. If we want to benefit from the size of the European market with its 500 million potential customers, I think we need to make sure that we deal with questions of standardization and interoperability, that we gain consumer confidence. On the next slide, we mention again the risks of cybercrime and low trust in networks. There's a very high figure given here for spam, 98%. That's very, very high. And I hope that in the future we will be able to deal better with spam at the European but also at the international level. Martins will say a few words about that later on to see what exactly can be done. When it comes to research and innovation, on the next slide, again you see that we are spending less than half of what the United States spends on research and development in the ICT sector, and that is certainly worrying, and that is something where we need to work on, and we will come with some ideas later on. And then as regards the last two, we're moving on to the next slide where you see some figures about the lack of digital literacy skills. I already said that about a third of Europeans have never used the internet. And I think what you see here is a digital divide, not only a digital divide between different parts of a country or different regions of Europe, you also see a digital divide between different groups of the population. I think the less qualified, less educated clearly use the internet less than the qualified people. The young people use it more than elderly people, and I think that is something that needs to be brought into a better equilibrium. We need to show that the internet can offer advantages for all groups of society, that it is a new medium that is certainly worthwhile to be tried, and it can help a lot to improve the personal situation, the work situation, and therefore is something that should be taken up and embraced by all parts of society. This brings us to the societal challenges on the next slide. I've mentioned only a few here. You see that 20% of electricity consumption in the world is used for lighting, and through the smart use of electricity, about 70% of this can be saved, which is 14% of total emissions, and that is a rather impressive figure, I would think. Also, we need to make sure that there are interoperable e-health solutions, not only within a member state, also between member states. That's very important. Again, these are the 7 points that we want to improve. We want to have a vibrant digital single market. We want to have very fast internet access, more spending in research and innovation, and better spending on relevant projects. We want to have better interoperability of applications and services. We want to create trust and security, and we also want to improve digital literacy skills and inclusions. And last but not least, we think that ICT enabled benefits for EU society can bring a lot to the solving of today's large problems: climate change, energy efficiency, only to name a few. If we can arrive at this virtuous circle, if we can have this mutually reinforcing system, then I think the half of the battle is already won. We're not there yet. A lot remains to be done. There are important challenges. Our instruments are, let's say, limited in some respects. There are financial means, there are legislative means, but at the end of the day, we also need to work intensively with stakeholders, with all parts of society concerned in order to make the digital agenda a success. How this can be done is something which Martins will now explain in more detail.
Paldies! Es strādāju informācijas sabiedrības ģenerāldirektorātā. Mans pamatdarbs ir saistīts ar elektroniskiem sakariem. Es sadarbojos ar Latviju. Es prieks redzēt daudz no saviem sadarbības partneriem šeit. Bet šodien es esmu priecīgs, ka man uz Latviju ir atvedusi šī globālākā tēma par digitālo programmu Eiropai, kura aptver gan mūsu pamatdarbu, elektronisko sakaru, bet arī vairākas citas tēmas. Es tādu runāšu par konkrētām darbībām, ko komisija likusi priekšā šajā digitālajā programmā. Es, protams, nevarēšu atspoguļot visas šīs darbības, jo to vairāk nekā 100, kā Mankāns kungs teica, bet es centīšos minēt galvenās. Tad, ja runā par pirmo tēmu, par digitālo vienoto tirgu, tad šajā jomā komisija gatavojas strādāt divos galvenajos virzienos. Pirmais ir veicināt pieeju radošajam, kreatīvajam saturam. Un otrā tēma ir pārobežu un tiešsaistes maksājumu veicināšanu, vienkāršošanu. Kad runā par konkrētām darbībām, tad 2010. gadā, to šogad komisija plāno izstrādāt direktīvu par kolektīvo tiesību pārvaldību. Ir arī pasludināts, ka tiks izstrādāta direktīva par tiem darbiem, kuru autortiesību subjekts nav nosakāms. Būs vēl viens instruments attiecībā uz tiem darbiem, kuri vairs nav apritē. Tie ir vairāk tādi tehniski pasākumi, bet komisija vienlaikus arī 2010. gadā taisās izdot tā saucamo zaļo grāmatu, lai uzsāk diskusiju par lielāku globālu autortiesību reformu. Un 2012. gadā, balstoties uz šīs sabiedriskās apspriešanas rezultātiem, nāk klajā par priekšlikumiem. Ja runā par lietotājiem, tad lietotāju uzticēšanās ir, protams, viens no digitālā tirgus panākumu stūrakmeņiem. Komisija vēlas, lai lietotāji apzinātu savas tiesības un tādā veidā justos drošāki izmantot jaunās digitālās vidas sniegtos pakalpojumus. Ļoti bieži vien bailes par personas datu izmantošanu vai par privātās dzīves aizskārumiem ir viens no tiem šķēršļiem, kas mūsu cilvēkiem neļauj pilnvērtīgi izmantot visu šīs priekšrocības. Ja runā par vienoto telekomunikāciju pakalpojumu tirgu, šī tātad mūsu tēma, kuru mēs ikdienā strādājam, tātad komisijas pirmā prioritāte, protams, ir nodrošināt to, lai tiktu konsekventi un korekti ieviesti 2009. Gada beigās reformētie, modernizētie Eiropas elektronisko komunikāciju noteikumi. Dalība valsts šobrīd atrodas šo noteikumu transpozīcijas procesā, un tie ir jātransponē līdz 26. mājām 2011. gadā. Šai reformai ir bijušas ļoti tiešas sekas attiecībā uz Latviju. Mankāns kungs jau pieminēja, ka Latvijā tiek izveidots jaunā Eiropas telekomunikācija regulātora birojas. Un šī biroja izvietošana ir viens no tiem panākumiem, kas izrietēja no 2009. Gada beigās veiktās telekomunikācija noteikumu reformas. Šī transpozīta ieviešana darba ietvaros komisija arī gatavojas izstrādāt vadlīnijas tādos aktuālos jautājumos, kā izmaksu aprēķināšanas metodoloģijas, vienlīdzīgas attieksmes noteikumi. Komisijas mērķi attiecībā uz interoperabilitāti, kā viņi tulko sadarbspēju, stimulēt konkurenci un inovāciju. Tātad komisijas plāno izdot juridiskus aktus, lai vienkāršotu tīpaši neformālu radību standartu atzīšanu. Tādu standartu atzīšanu, ko nav radījuši visoficiāls standartizācijas iekārtas, ko radījusi pati industrija. Tādā veidā nodrošināt, lai šie standarti ātrāk nonāktu tirgū.
Paldies mums visiem, un šī ir tikai pirmā saruna. Lūdzu, savus priekšlikumus noteikti iesniedziet RAPum, kas ir komisijas kontaktpersona sarunās par digitālo stratēģiju, un principā RAPum vienmēr ir nacionālais pārstāvs, kurš pārstāv dalībvalsts pozīciju tālāk jau Briselē, kur sanāk 27 dalībvalstis. Paldies jums, lai laba diena!